The scripture lesson for today is from St. John's Gospel, the 17th chapter, beginning at verse 6. This is Jesus' great prayer for his disciples. I have made your name, O God, known to those whom you gave me in the world. They were yours, and you gave them to me, and they have kept your word. Now they know that everything you have given me is from you. For the words that you gave me I have given to them, and they have received them, and know in truth that I came from you. And they have believed that you sent me. I am asking on their behalf. I am not asking on behalf of the world, but on behalf of those whom you gave me, because they are yours. All mine are yours, and yours are mine, and I have been glorified in them. And now I am no longer in the world, but they are in the world, and I am coming to you. Holy Father, protect them in your name that you have given me, so that they may be one, as we are one. While I was with them, I protected them in your name, the name you've given me. I guarded them, and not one of them was lost, except the one destined to be lost, so that the scripture might be fulfilled. But now I am coming to you, and I speak these things in the world, so that they may have my joy made complete in themselves. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them, because they do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. I am not asking you to take them out of the world, but I ask you to protect them from the evil one. They do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. As you have sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. And for their sakes I sanctify myself, so that they also may be sanctified in truth. Here ends the lesson. We join now in singing Just a Closer Walk with Thee. You may remain seated. It was a Sunday morning in South America, in a little chapel on the border of Venezuela and Colombia. As the Mass was beginning, a not uncommon occurrence took place. A band of guerrillas armed with machine guns came out of the jungle and crashed and banged their way into the chapel. The priest and the congregation were totally horrified and afraid. The men dragged the priest outside to be executed. Then the leader of the guerrillas came back into the chapel and demanded, anyone else who believes in this God stuff, come forward. Everyone was petrified. They stood frozen. There was a long silence. Finally, one man came forward and stood in front of the guerrilla chief and said simply, I love Jesus. And he was tossed roughly to the soldiers and also taken out to be executed. And several other Christians came forward saying the same thing, and they too were driven outside. And then there was a sound of machine gun fire. And when there were no more people left willing to identify themselves as Christians, the guerrilla chief returned inside and told the remaining congregation to get out. You have no right to be here. And with that, he herded them out of the chapel, where they were astonished to see their pastor and the others standing there. The priest and those people were ordered to go back into the chapel to continue the service, while the others were angrily warned to stay out until, said the guerrilla chief, you have the courage to stand up for your beliefs. And with that, the guerrillas disappeared into the jungle. Kind of a harsh altar call, wouldn't you say, when you think about those things? When we remember the history of America, there were lots of times when we wondered how people could gather in churches and then do, during the week, some of the things that they did all over this country and all over every country that considers itself to be Christian. That story I told the kids is a hard story to imagine, and yet it is a true story about the Germans and the American soldiers singing to each other and then starting to kill each other again the next day. These are life's moments of truth. When we think about the folks around us, I thought about it, of course, this week with Edith's passing. And it always makes each one of us think about our own. Our day will come, of course. And some people have said to me, well, Tim, what do you think it's going to be like when it's your turn? And the term I use is, well, it's either fish or cut bait in those days, isn't it? Either you stand up and believe, especially in my case, something I've been talking about for 40 years, or you don't believe it. These moments of truth, of course, are very personal sometimes. Each one of you makes your own decision about what you would be willing to die for, and what your death means and what your life means. There's also vocational choices. And America, unfortunately, sometimes fortunately, but sometimes unfortunately, has been infected by an individualism which has driven people apart. And lately, in the midst of the scandal among the financial institutions, we have seen that individualism run a little bit crazy. And we're all paying the price for that. Because much of America's founding thought was about the common good, about being a country where everybody benefited, where the country lived for freedom of every human being and the ability to pursue their own happiness in their own way. Now, this gospel we read this morning is Jesus' prayer to God to be with us in our moments of truth. The Message translation has part of this about being in the world and being not of the world. The Message translation, Jesus says, "They are no more defined by the world than I am defined by the world." How much are you defined by the world? How much are you and I swayed by the things that go on around us? How effective is advertising in your life, for instance? Very powerful kinds of stuff. Millions and billions of dollars spent every year to influence us, to try to make our definition of ourselves in concert with whatever product or idea that advertisers are bringing to us. And these are moments of truth, actually. Now, we think of moments of truth like, for instance, those among our military who are serving in Iraq and Afghanistan today. We know they have lots of moments of truth because they are in a deadly situation. And they are confronted by people who want to kill them. So many war zones in the world, though, not just that one. You've heard the stories, and I think one of the most despicable things that happens in our world is when children are recruited to be soldiers, and they're taught to love the gun and nothing else. And some children are brought in front of their parents, and the guerrillas or the terrorists or whatever you want to call them will kill their parents in front of them so they have no parents to come back to. And the army that they're drafted into becomes all they have. And some of the brutality of those children is unbelievable. They are defined by a world that we hope we never see here. And so Jesus is praying that we are not defined by the world, but defined by our relationship with God. And this prayer is for you and me too. It's a prayer for protection because Jesus knows, of course, that the way is difficult. We can try to deny it. But the difficulty of life, of course, always breaks through. And on top of what we know about life, we also suffer from what I would call fear-mongering. The idea that the guerrillas are almost at the door, especially in economic bad times like we're suffering now. It's easy to be fearful about what will happen and what the possibilities are of things going in the wrong direction. And there are enough people around, I would venture to say our former vice president is one of them, who likes to monger fear among the people. And so you and I make another decision. We have to decide whether or not we will live in fear. Yes, there are things to be afraid of, but we can live in fear or not live in fear. We can live towards God.